Hi guys, and welcome back to the Let's Get Real podcast. On today's episode, we've got Renee McGregor. Hello Renee, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, how are you?
Hi guys, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, really well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. It's always good to be able to talk about all things related to female health. So any opportunity, I will always try and say yes.
Oh, thank you.
So would you like to start off by just introducing yourself to anyone who doesn't know who you are and just a bit about your background, please?
Sure. I'm Renee McGregor. I am a sports dietitian. And I suppose I've become more and more known in specific areas within sports nutrition. I do work with just athletes doing performance nutrition. But I guess my areas of expertise tend to be female health, female athletes, REDS, which is a condition known as relative energy deficiency in sport. And I guess, on that same spectrum, eating disorders within sport. So they're kind of my areas of expertise. And I suppose more and more within that female health and female athlete area, talking about hormones and how important they are and how they affect us. And, in so many ways that we don't even realize. And I think it's, like I said, it's something that needs to be discussed. So I guess that's me. I've got a varied background. I came actually from a clinical background. I used to work in the NHS many, many years ago. And then in 2010, I did further qualifications and ended up working in sports nutrition, which led me to a really, I can't complain, a really varied and pretty cool career in the sense that I went to the London Games, I went to the Rio Games. I've supported teams going into other major championships. I still work with quite a lot of high profile athletes and organizations. So I can't complain. But I guess what's brought me here, as in where I am now and running my own consultancy, is just seeing the gap between male and female athletes and kind of how we are often sort of overlooked in so many ways. But also, I think athletes are seen as this kind of we often put them on pedestals, like they're not humans. And I think, at the end of the day, they have a lot of pressures and a lot of expectations. And if they don't know how to manage that, we see that it tends to manifest in these dysfunctional behaviors around food and exercise. And I just noticed more and more, particularly in the elite world, that this was, again, just being missed and people just weren't looking at it and they weren't listening to it. And if you don't have your health, both your physical and your mental health, you can't really perform well. So I suppose that's where I took a bit of a step back and sort of stopped working with Olympic and Paralympic athletes and just started working with anybody that needed support in terms of, I suppose, surviving in what I call a performance-driven world. I think there's so much pressure, whatever level you are, whatever age you are. I just feel like we live in a constant world where we have these expectations and pressure on us. So it's understandable that they're going to kind of transfer into different dysfunctional behaviors that then make life even more difficult.
Definitely. And I think there's so much societal pressure at the moment to look a certain way and be a certain way. And all of that, especially for women, I'd say more so than men. And that also plays into all of these, expectations and external pressures on us.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I spoke at a school yesterday, and I don't actually generally go and speak in schools that often. It's not kind of the area that I tend to work in, but I was invited along, and it was a school that sort of has quite a big athlete population, so junior athlete population. So I think they wanted that sort of that element to it as well. And it was trying to explain to 16, 17-year-olds that, life is complicated and life is difficult even before you open up Instagram or you open up Snapchat or whatever else. And, humans are biologically hardwired to avoid emotional risk. We don't like feeling uncomfortable. We don't like experiencing criticism or rejection or judgment, but yet it's also kind of the human experience, But I think if we don't teach the younger generation how to actually deal with our emotions, then we're going to see these pressures and these behaviors present themselves more and more so, because we all develop behaviors that help us to navigate societal pressures. But it's understanding and having that self-awareness of, oh, actually, this behavior, it feels like it's supporting me, it feels like it's serving me, but actually down the line, this is not going to help me anymore. It's only a temporary fix. And I think, it's a really difficult one to explain and articulate very, very well. But I always sort of say, if you remember that kind of the process that we all know, that our thoughts will govern our feelings, and our feelings will then govern our behavior. So if you can sort of change any element of that chain, you can try and then change, the way you are and the way you experience life. I think all too much we take whatever we think as fact, and we don't stop and kind of ask ourselves, well, where does this come from? And does this really serve me? And where's the evidence that this is actually true? But we just respond to it immediately. And I think that's it. You were saying about the pressures on females in particular. I think you're right. Like, we are such an image-focused society now. And I think that, we create thoughts in our mind through the sound bites of whatever is going on around us. If you're spending a lot of time on social media, full stop, scrolling and looking at images, those images are creating the thoughts in your mind. They are responsible for what you think. And then obviously, the more you cycle those thoughts, the more they become your truth, the more they become what you believe in absolutely. And then each thought will have a feeling that's generated to it. So if you're seeing this constant image of the body ideal and you don't fit that, you're going to constantly tell yourself, well, I'm not good enough. I'm not there. I'm not what is expected of me. And you keep telling yourself that. And the feelings of discomfort are then what create behaviors of, well, I need to do more, or I need to change how I eat, or I need to change how I exercise, because that's only how I'm going to get accepted. And none of that is true. Like, I've just worked through that, but none of that is actually true, right? It's just, we project so much of our expectations and our attainment of worth in what we look like, that becomes the default that we go to all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's so true. And in particular, we train mainly women in terms of kind of aesthetics, but I try to focus more on strength and building muscle and making them feel strong and empowered and confident mainly. And I feel like there's so much focus on aesthetics, and often clients will come to us and they say, I want to look like this. And actually, once you peel it back about why they want to do that, it actually all stems down to just feeling accepted in society and wanting to fit in rather than anything else. And then after working with them for a while, it gets down to the fact that they go, actually, I just want to feel more confident. But that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your looks whatsoever.
No, I always say that, your body image is probably the least interesting thing about you.
Definitely.
It tells you nothing, does it? It tells you absolutely nothing about that person. People will automatically assume, they'll look at someone and they'll make an assumption, but an assumption is not fact. Like, a number of times I'll have clients that come into clinic and sort of say, yeah, but such and such, who's an influencer on Instagram, they look like this, so they must be really healthy. And you're like, I'm sat there going, actually, I know that person and they've got their own issues. And it's really difficult, because we have created this link between aesthetics and health, that a certain aesthetic equals health. And yet mostly the aesthetic that we think we have created as an ideal for health is probably the most unhealthy, unhealthy place for the body to be, because it's not normal for women to be a low body fat percentage. It's really unlikely that you're going to have a six pack unless you are genetically born that way.
Exactly.
And I feel like where I like to empower women is to understand that we're all different shapes and sizes. Like, if you want to set yourself an aesthetic goal for whatever reason, I'm not saying that people shouldn't aspire to something that they feel will make them more confident. I doubt it will work, but I'm not saying you shouldn't. However, you have to be realistic with your expectation. Like, I'm 5'2", I am never going to have long legs ever. So, through my teens, that's all I wanted. And I would beat myself up chronically about the fact that I just didn't look like my peers, and I wasn't long-legged, and I really gave my body such a hard time for it. But what was the point? I wasted so much energy, and the reality is I can't change my actual structure. You can tone it up, and you can make it stronger, you can make it faster, you can do all those things with training and good nutrition, but I can't physically change my blueprint. And I think it's trying to get women, especially younger women at the moment, but trying to get women to realize that you don't have to look like everybody else. And actually, it's quite boring. If you're all clones of each other, how dull would that be? And I think I also find it fascinating because when you talk to a lot of women, it'll be about wanting to be attractive to the opposite sex, or wanting to, kind of feel like they're in with a chance with meeting someone, or whatever it might be. But again, I would say, and I might be wrong, but I would say most men are not that fickle. And if they are that fickle, do you really want them as a partner? Would be my question. Exactly. At the end of the day, really what we look for in a partner is unconditional acceptance and unconditional support. And you connect with someone. Yes, there'll be an element of physical attraction. Of course there is, but you connect with someone because of your values and because of your experiences and because of the joint ventures that you want to do. That's what brings you together with someone. What they look like is a very small part in the bigger picture of that. But again, it's really interesting that we never talk about that. We always all these programs on TV that drive me insane, like Celebs Go Dating, and what's the other one? I can't remember. There's so many of them at the moment that are so image focused, and no wonder we all think that we have to look a certain way if we're gonna have a partner, or we're gonna have a long lasting relationship. It just, I think we're fueling so much misconception, and then that leads to this poor relationship with self, and then poor relationship with whatever tool you use to punish yourself with about not being good enough.
Yeah, and social media makes it so easy to compare to other people. And I mean, yes, social media can be good for motivation and education, yeah. But at the same time, because we're always scrolling, we're always seeing what other people post, and then they look a certain way, and then you just want to look like them. And I feel like we always want what we don't have.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely relate to you. I'm also 5'2", and when I was younger, I really wanted long legs. So when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, yes.
It is true. And you always want what you don't have, right? Yeah. Like, I've got 2 daughters. One's got curly hair, one's got straight hair, and they want each other's hair. But it's like, there's nothing you can do about it. It's just genetics. And that's where we're at. And you're right. I completely agree. Like, comparison, it really is the thief of joy. And I feel lucky because I'm of a generation where I do remember life before social media. We didn't have Instagram. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have Twitter. And yes, we probably did, we did have magazines, and we had plenty of images to aspire to. But because they were contained in that world as like celebrities or pop stars or even athletes, it's almost like, well, that's them. I'm definitely nothing like that person. Like I'm a very different, I'm at a different stage. I'm never going to be an athlete, or I'm never going to be an actress. So yes, I admire what they look like, or I appreciate it, but I know that that's not something I need to be. But I think the problem with social media is it's broken down all these barriers, right? Like, you can follow anybody and everybody. You can find out the inside information, especially if somebody is willing to share it, about everybody. And I think, I sort of feel like social media drives that as well, because it's all about, even though they've done, Instagram have done a lot of positive things, like trying to remove the likes and all that kind of stuff. And I think they're working towards some really positive ways of dealing with the impact it has on mental health. But equally, it's still a platform which people use to attain worth. And, I think people are always going to be interested in your life. So I have a team that helps me with my social media. And, my social media is very much an education platform. And that is what it has always been about. And we had a meeting on Monday. We always have a catch-up meeting at the end of every month, just to kind of go, what's working well? What do we need to do? What do you need from me for next month? Like pictures, images, whatever. And every single month I get told, your audience want to know more about you. They want to know more about you and your life, because that's what people are interested in. So if I put like a tiny little snippet of something, it gets loads of kind of attention. But I don't want to share my life with the rest of the world. I'm a very boundaried and private person, and I'm very happy to share my work life. I'm happy to share aspects of my running and what I do, but I don't really want to share my personal relationships and my family and what I eat and how I train, because I don't think it's important or necessary for people to know that. Just because that's me, that doesn't mean that's what you need to do. And I think, I was talking to a client this morning, and we were chatting about what was going on for her, and we were talking about blood tests and what the body was showing her. And I said, it's amazing, isn't it? The body is amazing that it is telling you all these things. And she was going, well, this was going on in my life. And I was like, yeah, that's what the body's telling you. It's there. And she said, it's mad that my body knows what to do. I said, well, this is what we forget. The body and the mind actually do know how to regulate. They do know what is best for you. But we have become so seduced by external validation and external cues that we've forgotten to tune into our internal signals. And I wish more people would just kind of listen to what their bodies need. If I go out 4 nights in a row, which does happen occasionally, by the 5th night, I'm like, yeah, I really don't want to drink today. And I actually really do feel like I need some vegetables. Now, that's okay. That's normal regulation, because my body's going, yeah, you've had quite a lot of alcohol and you've had quite a lot of desserts and probably a bit more, too many chips, and you need something else. But that's how you regulate. But the more we deprive ourselves with food, the more we fixate on what we should and shouldn't have, the more we focus on, what we are supposed to do rather than what we want to do, the more separated we become from our internal cues. And that's then what starts to make life so difficult and complicated. And I always say life is hard enough. Nobody's life works out all the time. It just doesn't. We all experience pain. We all experience adversity. We all go through huge curveballs. I mean, look at COVID, right? Yeah. We've all experienced something actually all together, and how hard that has been for so many of us. And life is hard. I think trying to believe that you can control life by fixating on your food or fixating on what you look like or kind of, exercising in a certain way is naive and futile, because what you eat is not going to change what's going to go on around you. It's not going to change how someone might view you, or what they might say, or if you're going to get that job or not get that job. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's so disjointed, and yet it's the tool people use.
Yeah, definitely. For anyone listening who is a bit unsure about what the fundamentals of a healthy diet for a female is, do you mind just quickly running over that for our listeners, please?
Sure. I mean, the fundamentals are that, you do eat a little bit of everything. There's no anything, nothing's off the agenda. I don't like calling foods good or bad. I don't think that's necessary. But there are foods that you should eat more of, and there are foods you should spend less time with, is how I tend to kind of describe it. So, everybody's diet should contain complex carbohydrates, ideally whole grains, because this is the body's preferred source of energy. It likes carbohydrate. It's easy to break down. It helps you to think. The brain uses 20% of our overall energy intake every single day, but it likes glucose. When it doesn't have glucose, it doesn't work that well. No matter what anybody says, it doesn't work that well. It doesn't work as well as it does on ketones, no matter what people say. The brain likes glucose. So, complex carbohydrates are important, not just for energy, but also for your gut biome. And we are seeing more and more the links between gut biome and health, both mental health and physical health, and even athletic performance. And also, I think, like, our gut health is also very much regulated by hormones as well. So it's all interlinked, so if you can give yourself a good start by including whole grain carbohydrates, and I suggest, having carbohydrates at every meal and probably most snacks as well. But I know it's a fear food for a lot of people because they associate it with weight gain, which is again, not credited. That has just been a myth that has gone out of control. And then you need to keep some protein in there. So, ideally that can be whatever, like if you eat everything, then include meat, include things like red meat once or twice a week, because although red meat, yes, has some saturated fat, choose leaner cuts. It also is a really great source of iron, which is so important for women. And actually women find it quite difficult to get iron in their diets. I'm not anti-plant-based. In fact, I'm vegetarian myself, but it's really, really difficult to get iron from plant-based options. I know people say, but you can get it from spinach, and get it, but it's really difficult to obtain. It doesn't break down as easily. It's much more binded up with phytates and oxalates, which make it harder for you to access. So if you are somebody that eats meat, then have red meat, even just once a week, will give your iron levels a real boost. But other good protein sources include eggs, chicken, fish, tofu. I do put beans and pulses in there, but I don't want people to use beans and pulses. It's a difficult one because I think people assume beans and pulses have got carbs in them, which they do, but I actually tend to say beans and pulses are more protein based, and carbs are your your potatoes, your rice, your pasta, those sorts of things. And then you want some essential fats. We all need essential fats. If we don't have essential fats in our diet, we can't absorb fat soluble vitamins. So things like your vitamin D, which is so important for bone health, for muscular recovery, for your mood, for your immune system. It's a really critical vitamin, and we can't absorb that if we don't have enough fat in our diet. So essential fats being, oils and seeds and avocados, things like oily fish are really, really good. Nuts and nut oils, all those sorts of things that you want to increase, you want to definitely include. So that's like your basic diet. And then of course you have your fruits and vegetables, but you have to be careful that you don't displace the carbs, the protein, and the fats with fruits and vegetables. So many women I know will eat a massive plate of vegetables with maybe a piece of chicken and go, oh, that's dinner done. But that's not enough energy. The problem with fruit and vegetables, much as I think it's great in terms of vitamins and minerals and fiber again, it is mainly fiber, which means you don't have any energy value from it. The body breaks most of it down and there's no actual energy value. So when we go into understanding energy availability for women and how much energy availability they need for good hormonal control, if you're eating a load of vegetables with your bit of protein and saying, well, that's carbs. And again, that's come from, fitness trackers and food trackers that call vegetables carbs. Actually, you're not getting the energy you think you're getting at all. It's not available to you. So yes, I want you to have fruit and vegetables, but also want you to be mindful that it doesn't displace the things that you really need in good quantities. And then, then we throw in those kind of non-nutrient dense foods, the things that often get bad press, like your alcohol and like your sugar and like your kind of non-nutrient dense snacks like cakes and biscuits and stuff. There's nothing wrong with including them in your diet. Like, they're not taboo, they're not off the table, but the guidelines recommend that they should be the smallest part of your overall intake. So what we're saying is not never, just maybe not at every meal. It's kind of understanding it from that point of view. I don't drink every day, but I do drink. I do eat chocolate most days, but I don't eat a whole bar. So it's that kind of thing. It's being able to regulate. And again, if you don't put any taboo or rules around what you can and can't eat, it's not something that you just focus on. I think, as soon as you say I can't have something, you want it, right? Yeah. So So, if you say, actually, everything is allowed, I can have whatever I want. You just don't want it as much. I'm like I said, I went away at the weekend with my partner, and we went out for food Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I had dessert one of those days because I really felt like it. But actually, the rest of the time I was like, actually, I'm okay. I don't need it. Because it wasn't off the table. It wasn't like, I can't have this. It's like, actually, I just don't fancy it today. I'm quite full. So again, nothing is off limits, but it's more about the balance and the way in which we consume that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes what lots of people do is they restrict themselves so much, and then that can create really unhealthy
cravings, I guess.
Yeah, cravings and a really unhealthy relationship with food. And so then they do, I guess, give in to these cravings, which they should be allowed anyway. And then it just creates a pattern of just going up and down the whole time.
Exactly. And I think the other food group that's really important to mention here is obviously dairy, or at least foods that contain calcium. So if you're plant-based, then okay, soya is probably your next best option, or sort of edamame beans, tofu, that kind of thing. But if you're not vegan, and it is really vegan that tends to avoid dairy, then dairy is your friend, in the sense that it is such a good source of calcium and phosphorus. And those are really essential for your teeth and for your bones, but also for your muscles, that, in terms of muscle contraction. So if you do a lot of exercise, you do need calcium, because you need it for the muscle contraction. And again, I feel like in females particularly, they tend to avoid dairy. I mean, I'm a massive cheese eater.
Me too.
I mean, my partner's is like, I can't remember what he said the other day, and I was like, well, as long as it's got cheese on it, because you and your blinking cheese. But I literally cannot live without cheese. Like it is. So I think everything's made better with cheese. Life is made better with cheese. So, but I think, like, again, women mainly do tend to avoid it. And it's such an, calcium is so important for our bone health. As females, well, I mean, everybody, but particularly females, we're probably more vulnerable in terms of our bone health. And as we get older, unfortunately, our bone density does decline, and we have to be mindful of that. So if you are avoiding dairy, if you're not doing the right types of exercise, if you're not providing your body with enough energy that it can have normal, regular hormones and periods, then you are putting your bone health at risk, which means you're going to be at much higher risk of stress fractures and stress responses and injuries. So it is a really important one. We used to associate osteoporosis with like an old people's condition, which you'd expect. But actually, the youngest person I've had in my clinic recently has been 18, and their bone density is worse than somebody at the age of 80. So it is a problem. Like, it's definitely something that's becoming more and more problematic, and we have to be mindful of that. And I think again, I know we're all being encouraged to eat more plant-based because of the environment, but again, you have to really look at the information that is out there. Being plant-based means that you are predominantly plant-based. It doesn't mean that you avoid dairy or you avoid meat. Being vegan is a very different thing, but being plant-based is that you're predominantly trying to eat more plant-based. But similarly, if you're thinking about the environment, you have to think about the fact that it's all very well saying that you're plant-based because you don't want to, meat production and everything else. But if you're getting avocados from Mexico, or you're drinking gallons of oat milk that actually costs quite a lot of, creates quite a lot of carbon emissions to produce, you're not doing the environment any favors. Or even simply, you still go on loads of, transatlantic holidays. You're getting on a flight 4 or 5 times a year. I'm sorry, but that's worse than eating meat. And I feel like there's this, you've got lots of celebrities that are promoting environment and being sustainable and all that kind of stuff, but they drive around in SUVs. They go on holidays 5 times a year. I'm sorry, that's not in line with worrying about the environment. So I feel like, again, we need to be I'm no expert in this, but I've got friends who are really on it, and then we talk about it quite often. And you know, one of my friends, he's written a book on it, and you know, he always says that it's about choosing local, it's about choosing in season, it's about choosing sustainable. It's not about not eating eggs or not eating meat or eating meat. It's a much more complex picture. It's about your day-to-day lifestyle choices. You know, do you use the car? Do you use the train? Do you get on your bike? Like, these things are really important to consider as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that lots of people try to put strict and structured rules and labels on things, but actually life doesn't work that way. And I personally don't think it should work that way. I think we should all have a very flexible approach to things and do what you can, and not say, I know, because a lot of people who say they're plant-based, they then get a bunch of backlash because maybe they were spotted having dairy or something like that, but it shouldn't be like that.
No, exactly. And I think, again, you know, we should all be allowed choice, and you shouldn't be, you know, you shouldn't be reprimanded because you've made a choice. I remember when my book Orthorexia came out, and I did that really bad mistake of going on Amazon to look at the reviews. Don't ever do that. Like, it's the worst thing in the world to do, because you always focus on the one review that's really bad, and like the rest are great, but you've got that one review and it really winds you up. And this guy had written this comment like, this woman doesn't know what she's talking about. She's, you know, promoting the dairy industry. I bet she's a big meat eater. And I was like, you obviously haven't read the book, because I actually say quite clearly in the book that I'm vegetarian, but that's not what I recommend people do. It's just because I've been brought up that way. You know, I come from an Indian background. It does tend to be more, you know, vegetarian based eating. And I actually don't like the taste of meat. And that's mainly a meat and chicken. I don't like the textures, so I just don't eat it. It's not really it's not an environmental thing, and it's not an animal welfare thing. It's just how I eat. And it made me really angry, because I was just like, you don't know me, but you've judged me, and you've now put this comment out there that the whole world can see. And I felt really upset that this person had done that without really understanding or reading the book fully. But you can't control other people, and you can't influence what they think or say about you. You just have to kind of regulate your own responses to these things.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is you can't, like you said, you can't control what everyone else says, but you can control how you feel, how you think, and how you react as well. And
look at the positive things and not just focus on the negative. That one negative.
Exactly. I think we're all guilty of that.
I think when you're a perfectionist mindset, the problem is that's the issue, isn't it? Is that's what you focus on, because it's the one thing that winds you up. But you have to, I mean, I was talking to my daughter the other day, and I think she'd done something on TikTok. I don't really know, but I don't really understand TikTok. But anyway, she'd done, and she said she'd had one comment where someone had said something, and I was like, yeah, but you've also had 500 comments or whatever it was that have all said, well done, or you're amazing, or whatever. So why are you focusing on that one comment? She's my daughter, that's why. But why are you focusing on that one comment? And, you know, we talked it through, and she's like, no, you're right. You know, it doesn't matter. I said, you know, that's one person, but look at the people you've maybe helped, or, you know, you
exactly
too. So I think, like, we have to, it's kind of those alternative thoughts, isn't it? Rather than kind of like that very top, that kind of quite not positive, negative. It's more, what alternative thought can you have? What can you do that actually changes then the feeling and then the response that you're going to have to that moment or that situation?
You don't know where that comment's come from. Like, they might be envious of you. They might, you know, they might actually think the book's amazing, but they're jealous, and so they're, you know, like,
exactly.
You just don't know.
And I think that's it. Like, again, you know, I always say all human behavior has a purpose, all of it. And generally speaking, that human behavior, that purpose is protection. We're all trying to protect ourselves from something or some emotion, like that emotional, you know, risk. And if somebody does feel envious of something else or what somebody else has, that's a really uncomfortable feeling. And you don't want to experience it. And, I think there are kind of two camps of people. There are the people that will internalize that and beat themselves up. And then there are the people that will constantly project onto other people to make themselves feel better. And I think that's it. There are two camps of people in that. And I find it fascinating. Like, I've gone through a lot of adversity in my life, and I don't hold any grudges. I don't, at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff I've been through has not been pleasant or fun or something that, I don't wish anyone else to go through. However, it has shaped me to be the person I am. And I always think, well, the people involved had their reasons and their purpose. And it's actually understanding that it is about whatever they're going through and having that understanding so that you don't hold a grudge, or you don't let that then eat you up, because that's where, again, it can become problematic, because you end up having these dysfunctional behaviors to deal with what you're experiencing.
Definitely. And kind of leading on from that, slightly different, but almost related, the mindset of women as well, in terms of achieving things in terms of nutrition, training, all of that kind of things. I feel like, I don't want to say we're stronger, but I feel like we can face adversity quite well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're all women here, so we're going to say that, right?
Exactly.
I think men and women have very different brains. And I think that women tend to be more emotion-led, whereas men probably tend to be more logically led, generally. It's a very generalization. But I think the problem with women being emotionally led is that unless you have emotional intelligence, it's then difficult to respond appropriately. So, and what we mean by emotional intelligence is not that you're in touch with your feelings, which is what a lot of people think emotional intelligence is. Emotional intelligence is understanding your emotions. It's knowing that they're normal. It's knowing that it's okay to feel sad, or to notice that you are disappointed or you're upset, and being able to work through that without projecting that onto yourself or to anybody else. It's about working through that process. It's about understanding that, actually life doesn't always work out. But again, that's not about you. That's just the way life is. It's about understanding that emotions will pass. This feeling is really uncomfortable right now, and this place you're in is really not very nice. But that doesn't mean it'll always be that way. So emotional intelligence is that real understanding of what our emotions are, what they're doing for us, and how we navigate them without responding to them immediately. And I've got really good emotional intelligence when I am calm. But when I am stressed or under threat or, scared, then my emotional intelligence goes out the window, and I'm like everybody else. I'm just react. And so again, but for me, again, part of the emotional intelligence is having that self-awareness. So when I notice that I'm being more punishing towards myself, or being more critical towards myself, or I'm really putting myself down more, and you hear it in the narrative in your mind. When I notice that, then I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on here? What is the bigger threat here? What is it that I'm experiencing that I'm not dealing with? Which is why I've gone back to this default. So I think women, we are more resilient because we probably have to deal with more difficult emotions, and we probably do deal with them, and we probably process them. I think equally, we probably have a slightly higher pain threshold because of the things we have to go through. Like, I was watching this program last night, it really annoyed me. I was watching it with my partner. It's called SOS car repair or something awful like that. and the man in it said, "This is just like giving birth." And I went, How the hell would he know? He's never given birth, and he'll never give birth. So how the hell does he know what it feels like to give birth? But yeah, I mean, I've done it twice, and it, I mean, I'm very lucky. I had two very, very good experiences. I had both my girls at home, and I was very, very fortunate and very lucky that I had no complications. And to me, they were both very positive experiences, but they did hurt. You can't get away from that. Like, it's part and parcel of being a female. But again, I use that when I'm out running, doing my ultras, or I'm, doing the extreme events I do. When I'm in that moment of, this is really hard, it's really painful, I'm like, yeah, but you've done this. You've done worse than this. Keep going. I think that's it. You use that. And I think that's what women are good at. I think women are good at recruiting information from within themselves and delivering. But I also think women are really hard on themselves. And I think we have to be really careful about that. I feel like we've always got something to prove. And that's why we push ourselves harder. And maybe that's why we get results. But I feel like it's a really fine line. Like, you have to manage it well. Otherwise, it can become something that's not as healthy as it should be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, in terms of our menstrual cycle, we go through the literal cycle, and we have ups and downs, and it's constantly changing. And there's no way that we can ever just be at a level, at the same level, because it is just constantly up and down all the time.
Yeah. And I always say to women, like, you are never going to feel the same 2 days in a row. Because the thing is, we have the menstrual cycle, and, you'll all remember the curves are going up and coming down, like, LH going up, FSH going up, then your estrogen and progesterone going up and down. And that, that is the kind of the standard curves that we see. But within that, we all have variation. Like, again, I was talking to a client earlier today, and we were talking about her periods returning. And I was like, I can't say to you that when you hit this number, your period will come back in terms of levels of hormones. Because for some women, yes, hitting 100 will encourage ovulation. But for other women, their threshold is higher. And that is genetic. And that's your own personal, system, your own personal levels that your body wants to get to. So it's really interesting, because that's why no 2 months are the same, no 2 days are the same. And when I look at all the people that are constantly body checking and trying to see if they look the same day after day, it's like, well, it's impossible, because there's so many factors that influence what our body shapes look like. Fluid retention, whether we are hydrated or not hydrated, where we are in our cycle, are we ovulating? Are we not ovulating? These things all influence how our body will look if you're looking at it at that microscopic level, not when you're wearing clothes, but at that microscopic level. And hormones do influence our rationality. We know there are definite certain times of the month where we will not be rational and we will not make sense. But that's okay. It's not, I don't want to let women off the hook, but I want women to arm themselves with information, own their bodies, and kind of go, do you know what? Yeah, these 2 days a month for me, I'm not that great. That's okay. And I don't need to avoid anybody. But I just need to know that I'm going to feel a bit shit, but that's okay, because I know why. And it all comes back down to that whole self-awareness again. If you understand the why, you can deal with it. And I think, that's the bit that's important. Like, I know that definitely 2 days before my period, whenever that might be, I will cry for no reason whatsoever. And it doesn't matter why or what I'm watching or how good my life is, I will always cry. And now I'm aware of that. Like, I've worked it out. I'm like, oh, I understand. This is what's happening. It's fine. I know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. You get on with it. So I think understanding your hormones, but actually getting to know your cycle is so important. But also understanding that lifestyle factors will constantly influence as well. So, if you're not getting enough sleep, that will have an impact. If you're stressed because work stress is high, that will have an impact. If exercise stress is high, like if you're suddenly doing more than you used to, but you're not fueling appropriately, that will influence. everything influences. If you're suddenly drinking loads of caffeine, that'll probably influence, like we know that caffeine and progesterone, that tends to, in some women, cause more severe PMS symptoms than in others. And again, it's so individual. Some women will sail through every cycle and not even notice. And then, we all know there are others that it's just a nightmare. But again, I think it's like, if you can track and understand your body and your cycle, you can then start to work out what you need, and even in terms of exercise, like there's a lot of talk about training around your cycle and what we should do when. And to be honest, there isn't enough evidence really to support that on day 5, we must all do this. However, we know there are trends. But again, there's a lot of variation between women. So generally speaking, what we know is that some women will struggle right in the early follicular phase. So when you actually have your period, and also at the very end of the luteal phase, so right before your period. They're the kind of the hot points, if you want to call it. And some women might find that through ovulation, they're absolutely on fire. And some women might not see that at all. And I think that's it. It goes back to understanding your own body and working out what you need. We also know in the luteal phase, particularly in the mid-luteal phase, so kind of if we're looking at a 4-week cycle, which none of us have, but let's say we're working on that, around day 21, 22, 23, when progesterone is really starting to change, this is when you might start noticing things like changes to your core temperature. You might find that you sweat a bit more when you're training, or you might notice that your heart rate's much higher than it was a week ago, even though there's nothing wrong with you. But the hormone influence has that. So it might be harder to hit some of the things you were hitting a week ago because it's a lot more effort, right? But equally, it's also when progesterone is dominant, we do tend to burn a bit more carbohydrates. So we do tend to have those sugar cravings. Again, it's not an excuse to go out and eat loads of chocolate, but it's understanding that you probably will notice more of an appetite and more desire for certain foods during that time because it's natural. But it's about kind of, okay, well, what can I do that means that I'm not going to pig out on chocolate all the time? It might be that I tend to find that I end up eating a few extra snacks, but snacks that are like, oatcakes and peanut butter, for example, or Greek yogurt and fruit and honey or something. So it's got that combination of different macros that are important to kind of keep your blood sugars nice and steady. I'll still have chocolate, but then because I've eaten something that kind of prevents those sugars ups and downs, it means I don't consume too much chocolate. So it's again, it comes back to understanding your body. We're not there yet where we can say you must do this and you must do this, and I don't think we ever will be, because no two women are the same. However, what I think is amazing is that we are talking about the fact that menstruation will have an impact on our performances and an impact on our mood and our ability to think and perform. So I think that is the first time, like, these conversations are so important. And it's about, again, like I said, it's about empowering women to understand that, own it, and then use it to your advantage. We don't have to sit there playing the victim. Yeah, we have a menstrual cycle, but there's lots of bloody good things about our menstrual cycle. Like, estrogen is such a good hormone. It's so important for us in so many ways. And I think, when we're at school, we're just taught about estrogen and babies. That's it. It's the reproductive, but our menstrual cycle is a barometer of our health. It tells us there's enough energy in the system to be able to have a child if we need to, but actually it's enough energy in the system that our body's working properly. Without estrogen, you won't produce growth hormone, which means you won't necessarily get the benefits of your training. So many women out there who have hypothalamic amenorrhea, who train excessively. And if I'm honest, it's futile, because you'll never get the gains that you're looking for. You'll never get the adaptation you're looking for, because without estrogen and growth hormone, that's not going to happen. Estrogen's really important for our mood, because it's a serotonin uptake receptor. So it takes serotonin into the brain and makes you feel good. It's great for our libido. Like, women never talk about their libidos. They never talk about how they may have wants, how they may want to have sex. And it's always about what the man wants. Well, actually, let's change that, because actually women have needs too. And having sex is a really important part, again, of our overall well-being. So I think there's so many subjects we don't talk about. And I love the fact that we're starting to have these conversations, because it's so important for women not to fear them, but to be talking about them. I was on a train yesterday on the way back from school with a friend who also presented with me, and it was quite funny because we're quite open, and we were talking about sex, and this woman next to us kind of looked over, and she was obviously really uncomfortable about it, and she moved. And I was like, yeah, and I was like, you know what, it's really sad that that's the case. Like, we weren't loud or anything, we're just having a conversation, and it was really interesting that is still something women find difficult to talk about, but it's an everyday need. So why are we not talking about it?
Exactly, definitely. And I think in terms of like how we feel throughout our menstrual cycle, because people don't talk about it, they kind of don't know whether what they're feeling is normal or not. And like you said, there's no two bodies that are the same. So sometimes if we do talk about it, then they hear something else that they can't relate to, and they go, wow, well, I must be different or abnormal or something. And it's just not the case.
No. And I see it. It's like, how do you know that somebody else is not experiencing the same thing as you if you don't talk about it?
Yeah.
It's like, because we don't get taught that at school. You know, sex education at school is so poor.
It's awful.
It's just so bad. And I think generally all it's doing is trying to stop underage sex, which I completely agree with. But you're then like, well, I don't understand any of this now. Like, is that normal? Should I be experiencing that? Is that what, you don't know. And even to the point with your menstrual cycle, understanding that your discharge will change at different points of your cycle, that's not something to be worried about. That's normal. And it's okay that this is happening. I just feel like we've got so much to teach women about their bodies. And I'm so pleased that we're finally starting to have these conversations. And my job, if all I can do is get women to start loving their bodies from the inside and really feel empowered by what their bodies can do. The body full stop is amazing, but the female body is phenomenal. The fact that it can carry a child, for 9 months, and then it can feed it for actually longer than a year if you want it to, is quite amazing. We don't ever stop and go, wow. And the fact that your body goes back to normal afterwards. It's really quite amazing. And I just think we don't give bodies the credit the body deserves. We just use it as a vessel that we constantly criticize or try and mold or punish. And it's so sad, because that, like I said, I just think if we could value our bodies for what they can do, life would be a much easier place to navigate.
But also, our periods can sync up if we're spending, it's just it still baffles me. I'm just like, how? It's honestly amazing.
We got 3 women in this house, and it's not great. but in a way it's like, oh right, okay, yes, that's right. Oh, you started today, oh, means I'll start tomorrow. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
I guess you can all have a period together, and
exactly
all, if your emotions are all over the place, then
I know. But it's the same as when I was at school, all the girls in my year synced up, so it was probably a nightmare few weeks all at the same time. But it's incredible how it works. And even I am a strong believer of women's intuition and the gut feeling. It's 100% it's a thing. And
I do think intuition's an interesting one, and probably not one for today's conversation, but it's a really interesting one, because I think there is a difference between intuition and I guess fear, and kind of, again, I think you have to be really in tune with your internal system to have that proper gut instinct, because again, humans don't like uncertainty. So if you're like, well, what's your gut? When someone says to you, what's your gut instinct? If you don't know the answer, you're more likely to go to worst case scenario and a definitive negative than you are to kind of really what do you think is going to happen. You won't let yourself maybe even experience that slight element of hope, because what if it's wrong? What if it's right? You know, and I've learned over the years, definitely my instinct is generally right, and I've often ignored it and then paid the price for it.
Yeah.
But I try now to listen and kind of go, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, it's okay, because I have the tools and the ability to pick up the pieces if I need to. But why do I sit here and think worst case scenario is better than the possibility that something great could happen? You know?
Yeah, I love that. Yes, definitely.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, this conversation has been amazing. And thank you so much for, like you said, opening up the conversation. I really hope so many people find as much value as we found in this.
And hopefully people can, you know, start to be more open and talk about it.
Yeah, and ask more questions.
Yes, definitely, because it's something we should be talking about more. I
think it'd be great. Like, it'd be lovely if, you know, any of the listeners, it'd be great if they kind of just tag something when they tag the podcast, whatever, like ask a question. Let's see if we can start talking about it. Let's get something, you know, let's get it moving, because especially I think the younger generation, that we just need to open up that communication. We need to start having those conversations, because, you know, my girls are really, they always say they're really lucky because they've got a mum that kind of talks about all this stuff, and sometimes they find it really hard because, you know, known for talking about all this stuff as well. But equally, they know that nothing's off the agenda. They can talk to me about anything they want to, and they still choose not to talk about certain stuff, and that's absolutely fine. They're teenagers, and that's absolutely fine. But I think, you know, if I think about my generation and my mum's generation, I would never have the conversations I have with my girls with my mum. Even now, I wouldn't. So if we can start to make people feel supported and have that space to ask questions, then I think we should 100%.
Definitely. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. If anyone wants to find out more information about you or where they can find you, where should they head?
So we have a website, which is just reneemcgregor.com, which is nice and easy. And there's loads of information on there about the clinic, but also about things that we do. So, you know, have a little read and see. We're actually just running a series of webinars. I don't know if this will come out in time, but we're running a series of webinars that may interest individuals just about female health generally. And that's all on the website. But also I am on Instagram. I'm on, you know, r_McGregor. So if you want to just find out more, generally, like, the platform is very education focused. Like, there's a lot of information on there about things. So if you've got a question, you'll probably find it somewhere in the grid. But that's kind of the main place, I suppose, that we tend to communicate. So yeah.
Great. We'll put all the links and stuff in the description anyway. But
exactly.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's really lovely to speak to you. Take care.